Well, the University of the West Indies, they've laid the first bricks and mortar for the construction of the $8 million chocolate factory, which is due to be completed, or at least suggested, around 2024. Now, to speak more about this particular development, I welcome to the program the Vice-Chancellor and Principal for the St. Augustine campus of the University of the West Indies, Professor Rose-Marie Belle Antoine. Good morning, Professor. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you for joining me. I'll start the conversation by asking you. You suggested that UWI is now one step closer to fulfilling a dream that will further enhance national development. Now, we can have our debates about the state of our cocoa industry, but from the University of the West Indies standpoint, how is this one step closer to the goals of national development?
Well, one of the goals surely is towards improving on agriculture, food security, and sustainability. So these are some of the goals that we also share at the university. So when I talked about that, I was thinking about that as well as in terms of UWI's own contributions to innovation and being in the community. There are so many goals that I think we can contribute to what I consider to be genuine national development.
Now, you've also said that it will generate revenue and speak to the bigger issues of our time. Those bigger issues, are they what you just mentioned?
Yes, food security is one, but also climate change and climate justice challenges that we face. Having an industry like a cocoa industry in a modern environment where you're going to be using the latest technologies and know-how, but in a frame which pays respect to the environment. Those are certainly important issues that I think we need to work toward.
If you could just kind of elaborate on what you mean by climate justice. That's a term that's not often heard or not often understood.
Yes, you're quite right. We need to do more on it. So, the climate change discussion, we think about it in terms of science only sometimes, but it's not just about science. What we've realized, and of course, University of the West Indies has been working on climate, one of the first universities to work on climate issues. But climate justice speaks to the broader social issues that surround the changes that we see in the environment and the challenges that we see in the environment. It speaks to things like human rights. It speaks to things like equality and equity. When we make changes, that we don't make people more vulnerable, because what research has shown is as climate changes occur, it is often the most vulnerable who are at disadvantage the most. We are all disadvantaged, but of course, if your home is more fragile, for example, it would be more susceptible to floods, etc. Your crops, the farmers, they have a harder time, things like that. So climate justice attempts to look at these broader issues of equity and justice within that frame.
And of course, the construction of this factory marks a one step closer to that particular fight. But you just mentioned equity and equality. Precisely how would this help, if it does help at all, with global trade structures?
Yes, and that is something I mentioned, which again we don't often talk about. And I specifically mentioned it at the launch because we have had a historical tradition going back since slavery, really, of trade which advantages the rich North countries more than it does us. And we are growing the goodies often or almost all the time, whether it be sugar, whether it be bananas, whether it be the same cocoa, etc. But we do not reap the full benefits because trade is inherently unequal in our world. And so when you do industry now, which is based in agriculture, you should always be looking toward improving that value added. So this factory is not just about the cocoa beans, and of course we are number one Trinitario beans in the world. We are one of the top and the highest priced beans in the world because of the taste and so on. But we want to go further. We want to create products from the cocoa so that when you create products, whether it be cocoa wine, whether it be chocolate, and a whole host of other things, then you have a better chance of getting more value, more money for your product, and it puts you on a more even playing field. It's also about negotiating better prices with companies that have a conscience, and there are more of them these days, international ones. And the Cocoa Research Center, which is really at the heart of this development. I mean, I'm here talking, but all the credit should go to the Cocoa Research Center and its leader, Dr. Path Umaharan. I'm sure you would have heard of him.
Yes.
Yes. So they have been, I'm just there as a facilitator already, but they have been doing all this work for decades. And so they also have, at this point in time, some very important links with international companies, chocolate companies like Lindt, for example, some of the top in the world. And there is that understanding that what we call fair trading and so on is part of that equation that we want to fit ourselves into.
Now, something here, our cocoa is renowned around the world. In fact, Cadbury used to export, and still, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of our cocoa for their products. But that being said, a lot of the products that are sold around the world are very high in sugar content. Is there a market for our local chocolate which focuses more on the depth and the pureness of the actual cocoa that is used in its product? Is there a market for that globally?
Yes, and in fact, I was very excited to hear the minister speak, Honorable Paula Gopi-Schoon, because she gave some statistics as to the value of that very question you asked. She gave some of the statistics, and from all accounts, it is still a very valuable product, chocolate, etc. There's a lot of money in high caliber, good quality chocolate, the top of the line of the market, which is where we are pitching 70% cocoa in our chocolate, which is a very high percent, which improves taste. So it's one of those niche markets, perhaps not so niche as before. I think everybody now knows about high quality dark chocolate. So that's where we are pitching, and from all appearances, there's a huge billion-dollar market for it.
Now, I know you also mentioned the benefits to local farmers with the establishment and construction of this factory. But what about local manufacturers? Could there be partnerships with local manufacturers so that they themselves can develop products with this particular factory and perhaps boost their export?
I'm glad you asked that, because we are also talking to manufacturers. The manufacturing sector in Trinidad is not as large as you think it is. It's fairly small. But I think there is some interest, and we are more than willing to partner. In fact, this is part of our broader entrepreneurial drive, as you probably would have heard. The chocolate factory is one. There are other things, sealants, marine sealants, roofing compounds, and so on. And in these endeavors, we have come to the understanding, we've seen it out there, the university cannot do it alone. And yes, we value partnerships with government, and we do have strong partnerships with government. For example, I want to emphasize that government gave us $5 million for the monies for the chocolate factory, and we're extremely grateful for that. But going forward, we believe that the trick really is in very vibrant, mutually beneficial partnerships with the private sector. And perhaps it's a way to encourage those in the country who can get into the manufacturing sector, because we tend to be more retail sector than manufacture.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of benefit for that, and we are willing to enter into partnerships.
Well, you mentioned the private sector, but you also mentioned this is part of the entrepreneurial drive. Do you think that young people now are more interested in agriculture, or is there a way to get them more interested in agriculture? This particular endeavor is one step in doing so.
Yes, very good question. And I have said and I've told Prof. Pat, as we call him, because he's basically on his own in terms of the CRC is an independent unit. But I have said to him that it's not enough for us to succeed at making chocolate. What we want to do is to revitalize and revolutionize the agricultural aspects of it, as we have done in the chocolate making. We revolutionize the industry there. And that means that his unit has to work with the Faculty of Agriculture to do that. We have the only Faculty of Agriculture in the UWI and indeed in the region with a very proud history, and we have the capabilities. And so we need to be able to encourage young people in particular to get into agriculture. Agriculture is not the old only, there's some part of it, yes, but it's not the sort of the old-fashioned way of growing things that we think we know. So there's a lot of opportunity for new types of agriculture, aquaponics, etc., new methods. We have been doing a lot of research at the university, things like resistance to pests and soil, work on the soil, etc. So there are lots of opportunities for young people to enter the agricultural sector and to do well. And we want to be, and we already are, part of that whole movement. We want to accentuate it, and we want to join hands with government in that endeavor, because I think we are beginning slowly to recognize that it is the only way for a secure future.
Mm-hmm. Now, you also said that we have the resources. The only Faculty of Agriculture amongst the University of the West Indies, when you speak about campuses throughout the Caribbean. But whilst we may have such resources, do we actually have the expertise that is necessary to push forward with such projects? Yes, Professor Uhamaran is part of it, and the Cocoa Research Facility. But is it that the expertise that is required is there here in TNT?
Yes, we have, and we have tremendous expertise, even as perhaps we've lost over the years some of our academic staff. We've had some attrition, but nevertheless, we still have a powerhouse in the faculty, and they're already doing a lot of work in the OECS and elsewhere. So they are a treasure here. We have some world-class researchers, professors, and so on in various areas, very varied, because don't forget they also do animal husbandry and these sorts of things. And one of the good things about the university, I always say, is that we can be multidisciplinary, which in my view is the way for the future, so that we have some of our scientists working with our agriculturalists, together to create solutions. Even with our doctors, that is in nutrition, working in agriculture, there are so many possibilities, and we have world-class researchers, and I don't say that lightly, people who are recognized as among the best in their field. And you probably know, and I suppose I should always remind everyone, that university is now ranked, since we entered the rank, it's the top 1.5% in the world, and of course number one in the Caribbean. But apart from that, we have individual researchers who are winning prizes, who are known out there in their field. So I don't think we should question the quality. We could do it some more quantity, we could do it some more money to hire some more people for sure. That is a big challenge we have. But certainly quality is there, interest is there, know-how is there.
So if you're concerned that we have the quality of the individuals, the quantity is always debated and more action is needed, do you think that whilst this factory is an opportunity and perhaps a flagship, do you think that it could survive given the current climate and how the climate is ever changing and so unpredictable?
You mean climate as a physical climate, or?
Yes, the climate as in the physical climate, as well as globally the adaptation towards different tastes as well.
Well, some years ago I was at a meeting, I think it was an OES meeting, and I observed people around me. And I said, if I were ever to become a dictator in this world, what I would do if I wanted to get people to do what I wanted, I would tell them you can't have any chocolate because there are so many chocoholics. I don't think I remember that was when I learned that they are artificial chocolates. I didn't realize they were doing these modified things. Of course, ours is natural. But the point I'm making is I don't think chocolate will ever go out of taste or ever go out of style. People love chocolate. There will always be a market for great chocolate. And although the climate itself, in terms of the physical climate, is changing, yes, and that's part of why we have to adapt some of the methods I mentioned to you as to how to grow things, because part of our mission is also to improve the production of the cocoa, because it has fallen, of course, over the years.
Yeah.
Right? So yes, that's why I mentioned to you, we have to find new ways, use innovations, and so whether it's greenhouses, etc., to grow food, chocolate, to grow cocoa, anything. We all have to think of that. We all have to pay more attention to how we treat our hillsides, cutting down all the trees, how we treat when we're building something, we cut down every blade of grass, every tree in order to build a house, which of course not just destroys the environment, but makes it more insecure in terms of flood. So these are big, big questions which the university must work with the government of the day to also solve these problems. So it's not a single sort of unilateral, insular type of issue. It's multifaceted. But yes, ultimately, I do think that the cocoa and the cocoa industry can and will survive. And it has survived many, many years. It has declined only because some people left the industry, but it hasn't declined in terms of its worth and its value. So I do think it will survive, yes.
People leaving the industry, this will allow for people to come back into the industry, seeing that the actual investment is taking place.
Exactly. That's what we hope, and I feel pretty confident that, especially if we can continue and enhance these partnerships, public-private sector partnerships, that young people take notice, and it's a kind of a sexy industry, I think. I mean, my best friend is a chocolatier. She's an engineer, but she's also a chocolatier. She went to the courses at UB, etc. And there are many people who they may be looking on now and saying, So I think there's a lot of opportunity. There's a local market, there's a regional market, and there's an international market.
And how integral are these public-private sector partnerships? Not only how integral are these public-private sector partnerships, not only for this particular industry, but generally all around? How integral is it in forging a way forward?
Well, my personal view is that it is absolutely vital. This is before I came on. I know the university was often attempting to do things on their own, and there are many things that we can do on our own. I mean, all of these innovations and inventions, and so we did on our own, and we can do a lot. But I think once we get into this side of it and the commercialization and the marketing, and so that we should not and possibly cannot do it alone. If we do it alone, it will take too much effort. We are not sort of built that way. Yeah, so I think we will have enormous value in these partnerships. So for me personally, my view is that they are absolutely vital.
Professor Rose-Marie Belle Antoine, I want to thank you very much for joining me this morning, and I'd just like to openly and publicly express my appreciation that you're not a dictator, because I can't live in a world without chocolate.
See what I told you? Yeah. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All your viewers.
Yes. Do have a good day and keep well.